Hi all, welcome back to Computer Organization course. We'll get started. So in the last class, we had seen about handling of the multiple devices, right? So in that interrupt handling, we had seen vectored interrupts, interrupt nesting, and simultaneous request. So in simultaneous request, there were two schemes that is daisy chain and interrupt arrangement of the priority groups. Okay, so we will continue our discussion from the topic controlling device request. So until now we had assumed that an IO device interface it generates an interrupt request whenever it is ready for the IO transfer. For example, we had seen the flag status in SIN, right? It will be equal to 1. So it is important to ensure that the interrupt requests are generated only by those input output devices that are being used by the given program. Okay, idle devices should not be allowed to generate the interrupt request, even though they may be ready to participate in the IO transfer operations, but they should be restricted. So, for this, we need a mechanism in the interface circuit of the individual devices to control whether the device is allowed to generate an interrupt request or not. So, the control needed it is usually provided in the form of interrupt enable. It is a bit in the device interface circuit. So the keyboard interrupt enable, that is KEN, and we have for the display enable we have DEN flags in the register control, right? So if you see this diagram, so here you can see that, right? Here, wait a minute, yeah, this one, these two. So one is for keyboard enable, the other one is for display enable. So whenever these are set, then the keyboard or the display they can raise the request. That means they can raise the interrupt. Okay. So whenever these flags are set, that is your KEN and DEN, the device interface circuit it generates an interrupt request whenever the corresponding status flag in the status register is set. That means these two. So suppose if keyboard wants to raise a request, then what it should do is like it has to set both this KEN and this bit keyboard interrupt bit. So these two should be active or it should be high. Okay. Suppose this bit control bit that is enable bit keyboard or display if it is 0, then the device interface circuit it will not generate the interrupt for the particular device. Okay, whatever may be the status status flag value either 0 or 1, but whenever if these two are set, then only that particular device in a interface circuit it will generate the interrupt. If not, if that means it does not consider your status flag values, everything depends on your interrupt enable. Okay, so next we will study about exceptions, right? So interrupt is an event that causes the execution of one program to be suspended and the execution of another program to begin. So we know this one. So far we have dealt with only with the interrupts that are caused by the request received during the IO data transfers. So, but your interrupt mechanism is used in number of other situations. So one among them is your exception. So the exception it is used to refer to any event that causes the interruption. I'll repeat, exception is used to refer to any event that causes the interruption. So IO interrupts are one example of your exception. Okay, so we have to understand now different kinds of exceptions. For your syllabus, you have three types, that is recovery from errors, debugging, and privilege exceptions. So we will understand this one by one. The first one is recovery from errors. To check that all the hardware components are working, or operating properly, the computer uses a variety of techniques. So, for example, if you can consider, detection of errors in the stored data. So, what could be done is to check whether there are any errors. Your main memory it would contain an error checking code. Okay, if there is any error, the control hardware detects it and informs the processor by raising an interrupt. So again, your processor itself can raise a, if it checks the program and it feels like there is any error, it can raise an error, or basically it can interrupt the program. For suppose example, you consider the instruction as add a comma b. So here the opcode is add, right? So say suppose the instruction, say by mistake you have written, instead of a double d, that is add, just you have written ad, that is add. Okay, so your processor understands that this is an illegal opcode. So in this situation, or for example arithmetic instruction which may result in division by 0, in such situation your processor, it can also interrupt the program if it detects any error. So when execution, or exception processing is initiated as a result of such errors, your processor, what it does is it process, or it executes in the same manner as in case of your IO interrupt request, but it suspends the program and which is being executed, and it will start the exception service routine or interrupt service routine. So this routine takes appropriate action now to recover from the error if possible, or it will inform the user to handle the exception or error. Okay, the next one is debugging. Our system software, it include a program called as debugger. So this program debugger, what it does is like it helps the programmer or the developers to find the errors in the program. So the debugger, it uses exceptions to provide two important facilities called as trace and breakpoints. Okay, so when a processor is operating in a trace mode, an exception occurs after execution of every instruction, using the debugging program as an exception service routine. The debugging program, it enables the user to examine the contents of the register, memory locations, etc. So on return from the debugging program, the next instruction in the program is being executed, and again your debugging program is activated. And this process, it continues. That means your processor executes in the trace mode. Okay, your processor executes one instruction and your debugging program is executed after that. So once it is done, again another instruction is executed, again the debugging program is executed. So this fashion continues. So the trace exception, it is disabled during the execution of your debugging program. The next one is breakpoints. So again your breakpoints, it provide a similar facility, but the only change is here is program being debugged is interrupted only at specific points that is selected by the user. So previously what happened, once one instruction was executed, then that debug program was getting executed. But here in the breakpoint, what happens, this program that is being debugged, it is interrupted only at specific points, that too that is specified by the user. Okay, the instruction called trap or the software interrupt, it is usually provided for this purpose. Execution of this instruction, it results in exactly the same action as when the hardware interrupt request is received. So while debugging a program, the user may wish to interrupt the program execution, say suppose after some instruction. Now your debugging service or the routine, it saves the instruction which is at the next point, and it replaces it with software interrupt instruction. Okay, the two things you have to keep in mind while debugging is the trace and breakpoints. So the another type of exception is privileged exception. So to protect the operating system of the computer from being getting corrupted by the programs, we need certain instructions that can be executed only when the processor is in its supervisor mode. And these things are called as privileged instructions. For example, when the processor is running in the user mode, it will not execute any instruction that changes the priority level of the processor, or say that enables the user program to access some areas of the computer memory that have been allocated to the user. So if there is an attempt made to execute such an instruction, it will produce a privilege exception. So it causes the processor to switch from its supervisor mode, switch to its supervisor mode and begin or start executing the appropriate routine in the operating system. Okay. So the next concept what we'll study is the direct memory access. So we had seen like from processor how your output data will be sent to the device or how the input is taken from any input device. So if an instruction we had and it transfers the input or the output data, how it will be executed is like your processor, it determines whether the IO device is ready. So your processor either it will poll the status flag in the device interface or it waits for the device to send the interrupt request. So in both the cases, overhead is incurred, like some time is spent, right? So because several program instructions must be executed for each data word transferred. So in addition to the polling the status register of the device, some instructions are needed for incrementing the memory address and keeping track of the word count. So whenever interrupts are used, there is an additional overhead associated with the saving of the program counter and restoring of the program counter and other state information. So to transfer a large block of data at high speed, we use alternative approach. So we use a special control unit which may be provided to allow the transfer of the block of data directly between the external device and the main memory without your continuous intervention of the processor, right? So now this approach we call it as direct memory access or DMA. So to minimize the use of the processor while transferring the data. Okay, so we have another method. So that method we call it as DMA, that is direct memory access. Now the the DMA transfers, these are performed by a control circuit that is part of the IO device interface. Again, so we refer to this circuit it as a DMA controller. Your DMA controller, it performs the functions that would be normally carried out by the processor when accessing the main memory. So we had understood that this DMA controller it transfers the data without the continuous intervention of the processor. But the operation of this DMA controller it should be under some program control and which is executed by your processor. So to initiate the transfer of the block of words, first the processor it sends the starting address, the number of words in the block and the direction of the transfer, like it's read, write, whatever. Okay. So when the entire block has been transferred from the device to the main memory, the controller informs the processor by raising a interrupt signal. So when a DMA transfer is taking place, the program that requested the transfer it cannot continue and your processor can be used to execute any other program. So once the direct memory access transfer is completed, your processor can return back to the program that it has left in the middle. Okay. Your input output operations are always performed by the operating system of the computer in response to a request from an application program. Operating system is responsible for suspending the execution of one program and starting the execution of another program. So for an IO operation involving your DMA, your operating system it puts the program that requested the transfer in a blocked state and then it initiates the DMA operation and starts the execution of another program. So once the transfer is completed, DMA controller it informs the processor by raising an interrupt request. So in response to that request, operating system puts the suspended program in the runnable state so that it can be selected by the scheduler to continue the execution. So first we'll look into a diagram that has the registers in a DMA interface. Okay. Yeah. Now this is the diagram wherein you have the starting address, word count and status and control. So it is an example of a DMA control register that are accessed by your processor to initiate the transfer operations. So we have two registers, that is starting address and word count, to store the starting address and word count of the block. The third register, it contains the status and the control flags. The first one, this one. Okay. So your read write bit here, sorry, yeah, this bit, read write bit, the first bit, okay. So it determines the direction of transfer, whether it is read or write. So when this bit is set to 1 by the program instruction, the controller, it performs the read operation. Remember, whenever this bit, this read bar write, okay. So whenever this is set as 1, so that means it is a read operation, otherwise it is a write operation, okay. So here read operations means reading the content from the memory and transferring it to IO device. So whenever this read bar write it is 0, that means it is a write operation. So when the controller has completed transferring a block of data from the memory to the device, it is ready to receive another command. Then it sets the done flag to 1. This flag, that is this one. So you have to understand, whenever this read or write, that complete operation is completed, then only this done flag will be set to 1. Otherwise it won't be set. Okay. Now bit 30 here. Now this bit 30 IE, that means it is a interrupt enable flag. So when this flag is set to 1, it causes the controller, DMA controller, to raise an interrupt after it has completed the transferring of the block of data. Next, the last one is IRQ bit. So this bit is set to 1 when it has requested an interrupt. So understand here status and control register, it contains these all flags or the bits, okay. So whenever the read or write operation is getting performed, so whenever read operation is getting performed, this bit would be set to 1, otherwise it would be set to 0. So once reading or writing of the block of data is done, it is finished, this particular done flag is set to 1. Okay. So whenever this IE, that is interrupt enable, is set to 1, so this flag, it causes the DMA controller to raise an interrupt once its operation is completed, that is read or write or transferring of the block is completed. So this IRQ bit, whenever it is set to 1, it will request an interrupt. Okay. So it explains the same thing here. Next we will see the use of DMA controllers in a computer system. That means this diagram, it shows how the DMA controllers may be used. So your DMA controller, it connects this high speed network to a computer bus. So you have a network interface which has the DMA controller and it is then connected to the system bus. Otherwise it is in this manner also you can use, where you have disk and then it is connected to DMA controller, again it is connected to your system bus. Okay. So the disk controller, it which controls the two disks and also has a DMA capability and provides two DMA channels here, right? So it can be used to perform two independent DMA operations, as if each disk, this two disk, okay, disk 1 and disk 2, it is same like having two different DMA controllers for this disk. Your disk assumes that even though it is connected to one DMA controller, this disk will assume that it has separate or individual DMA controllers. So the register needed to store the memory address, the word count, so these are all duplicated here. So for both the things, both the disk, we have to have the memory contents, word count, starting address and all, right? So those things would be duplicated so that one set can be used for. So to start a DMA transfer of a block of data from the main memory to the disk, what has to be done is like the program first, it has to write the address and the word count information into the registers of the corresponding disk controller. Okay, here it has to write the starting address and the word count information. So it also provides the disk controller with the information about or information to identify the data for future retrieval. Suppose again in the future it comes from the same source, you can easily identify that your disk controller or the DMA controller, it can easily identify the source here. So the DMA controller, it proceeds independently to implement the specified operation, whether read or write. So whenever the DMA transfer is completed, this fact is recorded in the status and the control register of the DMA channel by setting of done bit. We had seen, right, whether whenever the transfer has been completed, the done bit would be set to 1. So at the same time, if your interrupt enable bit is set to 1, your controller sends the interrupt request to the processor and it will set the IRQ bit. The status register can also be used to record other information such as whether the transfer took, whether it has correctly transferred the block of data or whether an error has occurred or not. So the processor, it originates most memory cycles, most memory access cycles. Your DMA controller, it can be said to steal memory cycles from your processor. So here you have to understand the word steal. That means your DMA controller, it steals or it uses the memory access cycles which is originated from your processor. So this interweaving technique, it is called as stealing. Okay, so that means DMA controller will take or will use the memory access cycles that is generated by your processor. So the DMA controller may be given an exclusive access to the main memory to transfer block of data without the interruption. Now this is known as block or burst mode. So most of the DMA controllers, right, here you can see, so they have a data storage buffer. That means, so here in case of your network interface which is connected over here to a DMA controller, so your DMA controller, it reads a block of data from the main memory and it stores in its or DMA controller's input buffer. So this transfer takes place using the burst mode at a speed which is appropriate to the memory and the computer bus. So only then the data from the buffer are transmitted over this network interface to the network. So here a conflict may arise if both your processor and the DMA controller or again we have two DMA controllers. These two DMA controllers try to use the bus at the same time to access the memory. Now that is a problem. Okay, if these two device controllers or the DMA controllers, if they try to access the same bus at a time, or one DMA controller and the processor, it tries to access the bus at the same time, there is a problem. So to resolve this problem, a arbitration procedure is implemented on the bus to coordinate the activities of all the devices requesting the memory transfers. So we will see that bus arbitration in the next topic or next session. Okay, now we'll have a quiz, and the quiz question is, so in the last session we had some technical glitches, so you guys could not comment on the quiz answers for the same question. So here is your same question from the last session. Just answer this one. You have got a minute of time to respond. Okay, time up. That's it for today. We'll conclude our session. Thank you.